If you can enhance the elite athletes on one end, you should be able to also enhance the metabolism of a disease population. It's the same thing.
Research lead at HVMN.
PhD in physiology.
Dr. Latt Mansor.
A lot of people, especially in the West, we always think more is better. Something is good, it's better. But in metabolism, our body always regulates everything within an optimal zone. The temperature, your enzymes, everything is in a waveform where it goes up, goes back down, and it goes back up, goes back down. In America, more than 90% of us are metabolically unhealthy because of our habits, our lifestyle, our diet that causes this metabolic inflexibility to worsen into a chronic disease that then you have to start treating with drugs and not necessarily the root cause.
What's the diet you would recommend for people that have the metabolic inflexibility?
It really depends on.
Dr. Latt Mansor, welcome to the Hacky Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Dude, I'm so excited. It's in person. It's in LA. It's the first Hacky Media podcast in LA.
Oh, really?
So this is the first time we're getting outside. Normally, everything we do is in Dubai. So this is my little road trip here, and very happy to have you here on board. And not just the first time we're in LA recording Hacky Media, it's also the first time we have somebody on board with your background. So for the audience perspective, can you share a little bit how you got here today, what the background is, and the topic, obviously, ketosis, ketogenetics, everything, ketones, impact, metabolic health, metabolic flexibility, all those things we're going to speak about. How did you arrive here where you are today?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I know we've been sort of chatting for a bit now, and initially was planning to go to Dubai to record, and here we are. I'm glad to be here too. I'm glad I flew all the way in from San Francisco as well, and I'm flying right after this back home.
Appreciate it.
So I'm really enjoying, really looking forward to this conversation. So a little bit of background about myself. My name is Latt Mansor. I was born and grew up in Malaysia, and I went to the UK, did my undergrad in biotechnology from University of Nottingham, and then right after I did my master's also in biotechnology from Columbia University in New York. And after that, I told myself, I've had enough of school. I'm going to start earning money. I don't want to study anymore. So I started looking for jobs, and I found a job as a clinical trial coordinator at a pharma called The Medicines Company. And I worked for them for half a year, and then they promoted me full time. I worked for them from the Munich office in Germany for a whole year. And ironically, during that year was when I got inspired to apply for my PhD.
Mm-hmm.
And I applied to Oxford and Cambridge, and Oxford came back to me first and said, we would love to have you. And I ended up going to Oxford in 2011, did my PhD in physiology, anatomy, and genetics, specializing in specifically cardiac metabolism. So I looked at the type 2 diabetic heart and its metabolism in hypoxia, which is low oxygen environment. And it ties in very nicely to my family history because I'm looking at the link between diabetes and cardiovascular disease. My mom's side has a very high prevalence of diabetes and obesity, while my late father died from stroke. And before that, a few years before that, he had a heart attack and had an open heart surgery. So having the combination of both genes essentially put me at a much higher risk of developing diabetes and hypertension and all of these chronic diseases, but also open it up to a bigger risk of developing cardiovascular disease later on. So that really intrigued me on a personal level to begin with, and it has always been my passion. And then later on, I learned that, this kind of knowledge is not only good for my personal growth or my personal health, but a lot of people who are not privileged enough, who are not lucky enough to have access to this kind of knowledge should also know this, because there are a lot of things we can do in our, just changing our lifestyle could make such a big difference. And, don't need to be a billionaire, a millionaire to hack longevity and to hack health. A lot of people forget that because we see so much of these millionaires wanting to live beyond 100 years old that you always need money to live healthily.
I mean, I love the fact that you use the word hack 3 times because the Hacky Media was created literally to share the secrets of the 1% and then with the audience. And I think not only have you obviously the family history, but also it motivates you very clearly to figure that out. So as somebody where like as a founder, scratch your own itch. So you had the moment where like, hey, I have something here that if I don't figure it out in time, it might impact me too. So I love that in a drive where you got to this point. But now fast forward, you go through all this and you end up here today talking with me about ketones. Is there the direct correlation between what you just said when you don't have enough, the heart doesn't have enough air from that aspect and ketones came into play, or something completely different?
It's a little bit different because when I was doing my research in my PhD, I basically looked at hypoxia, a low oxygen environment, as a subset of ischemia. And ischemia is what happens when you have lack of blood flow.
Okay.
So when you have a myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack, you usually go through ischemia because there's a blockage in the artery. Therefore, your heart is not getting enough blood flow and blood supply as well as oxygen. But because oxygen is such an important element in metabolism, in our cell, in our mitochondrial function, that when there is a change in oxygen level, the response is usually very acute and very quickly. And therefore, it allows you to measure it very accurately and very within a short amount of time, rather than looking at a chronic sort of exposure. So then I tried to look into how is a diabetic heart different from a healthy heart, and how do they respond to hypoxia as part of ischemia, and how do they adapt to that damage. And I found that the diabetic hearts are more metabolically inflexible. So that was my research all around, right? Like we can talk about metabolic flexibility in a bit too. But then how it got from there to what I'm doing now in Ketone IQ and all about performance and cognition and brain fuel and ketosis is that I realize when you are able to help a disease population and you extrapolate that through a spectrum, on the other end, there are the elite athletes.
Performance.
It is literally the same. Metabolism is the same across everyone. Like all 8 billion of us are metabolizing at all times. Yeah. And therefore, if you can enhance the elite athletes on one end, you should be able to also enhance the metabolism of the disease population. It's the same thing. One side, you have a dysfunctional metabolism, and then the other side, you have a very well-performed metabolism. So that was when I joined HVMN, which is the company that is called Ketone IQ now. I joined them in 2019 because they just got a $6 million contract with the DoD, the Department of Defense, using exogenous ketones and looking at its effect on physical and cognitive performance. So they needed a scientist to oversee the whole project and also had some sort of business acumen and business experience in startup and whatnot. And they found me all the way in Malaysia, flew me out, interviewed me, gave me the job, and I signed the job in August. I actually moved in August 2019 to San Francisco, and at that point, we still had an office in San Francisco. And then in 2020, we went full remote because of COVID. And I have been overseeing all of our clinical collaborations, university collaborations, grant applications, claim substantiations, any studies that we want to really push out to look at, different aspect of metabolism, physiology, and ketone science in general. That's what my role is currently. And also, I think a big part of the role is what I do right now, which is to educate people around what ketones are, what metabolism is, and how supplement is nothing but a tool that people can use to enhance the foundation that they have built.
Well, I think we'll start from the baseline. From the audience perspective, as I said initially, this is our first podcast around ketones, ketosis, for the Hacky audience. So let's start. What are ketones? What is ketosis? All of us heard of the keto diet 5-6 years ago. Felt like it had a hype and kind of fell off a little bit. I tried keto for probably a year and a half. And I would tell people it's the most efficient thing I ever tried, but it's also the hardest to adhere to.
Yeah.
And I stopped a year and a half in because I could never fully understand if I'm ketosis or not. And the downside of if you're not in ketosis, but you eat like you think you're in ketosis by smearing butter on a steak was always a little bit too high for the upset of, hey, I might burn some extra fat. I'm more energy efficient. So if you give the audience a bit more understanding where we are today and what we know today, so from a baseline perspective, we can build on that.
Sure. And first and foremost, I have to also caveat that keto diet has been used for more than 100 years to treat epilepsy.
Yeah.
And it has been very, very useful. And also there are some clinical trials showing keto diet to be very effective against insulin resistance, against chronic diseases like diabetes. But if you notice, a lot of the science is using keto diet in solving a particular metabolic dysfunction. It may not necessarily be the best for performance optimization, and people might come for me at this point. But I know a lot of athletes who are also keto people, and they are doing great. But I'm saying in the general population, there are other tools that you can use. And even if you want to go into keto diet for a bit and then cycle it out, it's also a very feasible option to really reset your metabolism or reset your
I think we'll talk about metabolism right after, but just for the ketones and ketones perspective.
Yeah, what ketones are. So ketone in general is a molecule that your body makes. And your body only makes ketones when you are very low on sugar. So i.e. whether you are fasting or you're on a keto diet. So keto diet, you're restricting your carb intake severely. And then if you're fasting, you're obviously not eating. So when that happens, your blood sugar drops, your insulin drops, and then what kickstarts the ketogenesis, which is the ketone production system in your liver, then start to kick in, and your liver will convert fat molecules into ketones. And there are three forms of ketones that your body make. There are acetoacetate. Usually it will come out in urine. Acetone usually come out as a byproduct in the breath. And beta-hydroxybutyrate, BHB. And that's usually the form of ketone that people talk about. When you talk about measuring blood ketones, it's usually blood BHB. And because that form is the more stable form that is being transported around the body and also being used as a substrate, as a fuel that your muscles can use, your brain can use, your heart can use in order to create ATP, which is energy.
So when people do the finger prick, that's BHB.
That's
when
BHB.
they do
blood,
when they do the urine one, it's
acetoacetate.
Okay, acetone.
And then when people do the breath, it's acetone.
And which one is the most accurate one?
Yeah, I would say blood BHB will always be the gold standard, just because for example, acetone is a byproduct. So if you are more keto adapted, that means like your body is more efficient in converting ketones into the stable form and the usable form, which is BHB, then you'll have less acetone out. So in the breath, you might measure that you are low on ketones, but then in actuality, you are having a very high BHB level in your blood, and that means you're just keto adapted.
When you say high and low, just from the honest perspective, because I've read up a little bit from your statements, between 1 to 2.5, that's BHB.
That's BHB, blood BHB.
And one of the statements that you said that was for me surprising. Higher is not always better. Correct. And staying between 1 to 2.5 on a BHB level might be the optimal range. Can you explain the ranges?
Sure.
And then also why that statement higher is not always the best.
So just to put it in perspective as well, if you are not on a keto diet and you're not in ketosis, generally your keto levels would be between 0 and 0.1 millimolar.
Yeah.
And if you are in ketosis...
By the way, when it's 0 to 0.1, that means your body uses glycogen for energy?
That means your body is not producing ketones.
Okay, got it.
But
it still might use them, got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at that point, you are looking at primarily source of energy would be glucose or fats. Yeah. And if you are in ketosis, so the definition of nutritional ketosis is more than 0.5 millimolar. And when we talk about the ideal therapeutic ketosis level between 0.5 or 1 to 2.5, that is the level in a lot of these studies that showed beneficial aspects of ketones, whether it is a therapeutic benefit in sort of metabolic benefits, or from a performance point of view, if people are performing better cognitively, they can feel the clarity and whatnot. So, and why I say the higher doesn't mean, or the higher the ketones doesn't mean it's better. That statement actually works for anything in metabolism. A lot of people, especially in the West, I think, we always think more is better. Money, more is better. If something is good, it's better. But in metabolism, our body always regulates everything within an optimal zone. It regulates the temperature. It regulates your enzymes. It regulates your sugar, for example. Too high sugar, you get diabetes. Too low sugar, you get hypoglycemia and you might die. You need to be in the optimal zone. So everything is in a waveform. Even your hormones, insulin, for example, is being secreted in sort of, a waveform where it goes up, goes back down, and it goes back up, goes back down. Melatonin, your pineal gland, or your circadian rhythm, it goes up and then goes back down, so that we are always maintaining that optimal zone. So same thing with ketones here. We don't want it to be too high where your body doesn't even need to use that much energy, or your body doesn't know what to do with it. And as a result, you just, one, wasting it, or two, you might get, GI issues if you're consuming too much ketones. And, but you don't want to be too low, because then you won't have access to any ketones.
And you don't produce any. And now comes the point where probably the question I actually wanted to start with, but I want to give the audience a bit of metabolic flexibility.
Yeah.
Why is it so important? And why do a lot of people struggle with that?
That's a really good segue into what we're talking about, the optimal zone, right? Because everything needs to be balanced and within the optimal zone, metabolic flexibility is so important for us. And metabolic flexibility refers to the ability of our body to metabolize different substrates given a different situation. So for example, if you're sprinting, your body would want to metabolize more glucose because that is really fast energy and creates that fast energy without being dependent on oxygen. Because when you're sprinting, you don't have enough time to take in all the oxygen. Versus when you're walking, you burn more fat because you are in zone 1 or zone 2, and your body has enough time to take in the oxygen to metabolize and oxidize fat. So that sort of metabolic flexibility, depending on the activity, depending on the stimulus, your body needs to be able to swap over to whatever metabolic fuel that is most efficient for you. And what we have seen in chronic diseases such as insulin resistant or diabetes patients is that they are metabolically inflexible. So when they need to swap over, they are not able to, and that causes damage within the cell, within the mitochondria. So for example, in my research looking at the diabetic heart, within the heart cells itself, the myocytes, there was damage because they can't swap over. So their energy production becomes inefficient, and that causes oxidative damage. Over time, it accumulates and it causes dysfunctional on an organ level and cause the organ to fail. So that's why it is important for us to develop that metabolic flexibility. And in a healthy person, they're perfectly able to swap over whenever you need. High altitude, you swap over to glucose because glucose is oxygen independent through glycolysis. And then over time, your body adapts and then you burn more fat. Like that is a natural ability of our bodies to be able to switch. The problem comes with, for example, in America, more than 90% of us are metabolically unhealthy. That is when the problem starts. Because over time, because of our habits, our lifestyle, our diet, that causes this metabolic inflexibility to worsen to a point where then it starts to manifest into a chronic disease and symptoms that then you have to start treating with drugs, and the drugs are treating the symptoms and not necessarily the root cause. Some drugs do treat the root cause, and nowadays Ozempic is popular.
Yeah.
It helps people lose their weight and improve their HbA1c, which is great. But ultimately, how do we get there to begin with? It's because of lifestyle.
So, question from an audience perspective, a little bit more. There's a lot of people out there who have a hard time, call them skinny fat. So they're active, they're trying to, but they can't get rid of the fat aspect. And one of the statements that I heard was they are metabolically inflexible. They can't use the fat reserves for energy. They keep using the glucose level. So from understanding perspective, exogenous ketones, could they help in this case to jumpstart the fat usage? Or is it something more internal where you have to fix the problem internally first on a health level, and exogenous ketones will not help in that aspect?
That's a good question. And I was there. I was literally there 2 years ago. And I'll tell you the story in a bit. But the short answer is that ketones or exogenous ketones are just a tool. Some studies did show that it increases the enzymes related to keto metabolism, but not necessarily increase overall fat burning ability.
Okay.
So I think the underlying issue still needs to be fixed. And most often than not, the underlying issue would be hormonal. Because over time, you are already blunting the hormone response in your body. And in my case, for example, I was overweight all my life until I was 22 and I started exercising. I changed my diet. I lost a bunch of weight. I lost about 45 pounds and I kept the weight off. I was in a healthy weight range, but I was skinny fat. I had about 26% body fat.
Wow. Okay.
Didn't look it. I felt healthy. I could run. I could sprint. No problem. I could work out. And I had higher than average muscle mass too. But I just couldn't lose the body fat. And turns out it's because for the longest time, because I was in calorie deficit for too long, that I taught my body to be in a starvation mode the entire time. So whatever resources that I pour into my body, it clamps onto it and holds onto it. And what is the most efficient storage in fuel? It would be fat. So it holds onto the fat. So 2 years ago, I started training with this guy called Jay Ferrugia. You should interview him too. He's based here in LA. And he trains men above 40. He trains WWE wrestlers. And he basically told me, like, you just need to retrain your body to metabolize glucose. You need to eat more sugar. You need to be on a higher calorie so that your body recognizes that you are not starving. Because our bodies are not designed to prioritize aesthetics or prioritize to look good.
Survival.
It's prioritized for survival. So I needed to train my body by eating more carbs, and then my fat started shredding. So I went from 26 to 15% in 2 years, and my muscle mass stayed the same. And I lost about 30 pounds of just fat. And that, to me, as a physiologist, I was dumbfounded because I'm like, theoretically, I'm on calorie deficit. I should be losing fat, but I wasn't. And then now I'm eating more. I shouldn't be losing fat, but I was. So that tells me that there is more complicated, multifaceted aspect to weight loss, to metabolism, and to personalized method on how you can solve the problem.
Okay. So in that case, metabolic flexibility is more called on foundational level. So then explain to us why exogenous ketones then are so beneficial and when would you use them?
So there are a couple of aspects that exogenous ketones could help with metabolic flexibility. One, you are providing a different fuel, right? And two, you are essentially creating a different paradigm where your body is able to metabolize ketones and potentially fat and stay away from glucose. And this is from a different point of view from what I was doing. So I was on calorie deficit and I was on low carb. But majority of people are on high calorie, high carb, high fat. What they want to do or what they should do is to go on calorie deficit, right? To lose weight. And exogenous ketone can help with that because one, it has a slight appetite suppression effect. Is it as effective as Ozempic? No, it's not. But it is a food product that you don't need to inject yourself with, right? So that helps. Two, if you're on calorie deficit, you are essentially having low energy, right? You have low fuel, low productivity. Your brain will go into brain fog or whatever, and you just feel fatigued. ketones can help with that because it has been shown that ketones enter the brain. There's a hospital in Australia that measured if ketones can actually, ketone IQ specifically can get into the cerebral spinal fluid. And they did indeed see it going through that and show up in the cerebral spinal fluid. So it can enter your brain, and it does increase the brain activity and brain connectivity that has been shown in functional MRI. So that in and of itself will help you throughout your journey of weight loss and retraining your body to be more metabolically flexible.
Okay, so there is an aspect, a beneficial aspect there. But let's go away from the flexibility now. Let's just use from a hack perspective, as you said. So in my world, on a daily basis, you have the pre-workout, post-workout, recovery, cognitive, kind of like, intensive meeting or hours. You have the pre-sleep phase. And what I've read on, it's usable or it's beneficial for most of those cases. But if you could start with one, and it can be just your personal experience, because I understand that everybody's different, where you'd be like, this is the most benefit, the most bang for the buck that I get from it. When would you use it?
I can give you straight data too. Like more than 50% of our customers use it as a productivity hack.
Okay. So it's
cognitive, purely brain power, brain fuel. And we like to call it the BFF, the brain's favorite fuel.
And okay, so let's say I have a meeting at 2 p.m.
Yeah.
Like what time should I do it?
Half an hour before your meeting, pop a ketone IQ, and then you should be able to feel the subtle focus. You're not looking for the jittery caffeine focus where you're like, I'm ready to punch through the wall, but I want a more subtle, focused, coherent thinking. That's why I took one before we started recording. It's to be able to connect my brain and my mouth and be able to recall whatever memory that I have in the bank and come up with the right answers.
So one thing that you said in previous podcasts was that caffeine blocks certain pathways or certain, actions in the body. The thing about exogenous ketones, it doesn't block anything.
Yeah.
So can you explain that aspect, why it doesn't block anything but only provides?
Yep. So caffeine is a stimulant, right? It blocks your adenosine receptors to essentially inhibit you from feeling fatigued until the half-life is over, and then it falls off, and then you have the crash. Ketones, on the other hand, it is not a stimulant. It is a literal fuel that your mitochondria can use to produce ATP. So even though caffeine supposedly give you energy, and Dr. Kristen Holmes says this all the time, she's like, I can't tell people enough that caffeine does not provide you with energy. It stimulates you, increases your heart rate, increases your blood pressure and all of that, but you ultimately still need the energy source from within your body to be burned.
Yeah.
Ketones actually provide that energy. So that's the difference in supplementing ketones with caffeine. And that's also why we have a caffeinated version, because you get one molecule that stimulates essentially your demand, and you have the other molecule that is the
gives
supply.
You the energy, yeah. So when it comes from a half-life perspective, when you said you feel like 30 minutes late or you before that, how long does it hold on to? And what's the dosage that you need to actually feel something?
Usually just one shot would be enough for me for productivity hack.
One shot is what, 3 milligrams?
About 10 grams of ketones in a shot. But usually for workout, I like to take 1.5 or 2.
Okay.
But for productivity hack, 1 is more than enough. And usually it will last for hours.
So 20 grams for workout, 10 grams for cognitive function.
Yeah.
And is there a limit how much you can take per day?
We recommend not to take more than 3 per day.
Okay.
That's
so
the recommended dose, FDA GRAS. But a lot of our athletes also take more than that just because they are actively doing their training, running, or racing. And they're constantly monitoring what's in their body as well. And they're constantly burning all the ketones that they are taking. So they're taking more than 3. So there are cases.
I understand. The one surprising thing was when you think about energy supply and efficiency in energy, you don't think about sleep normally because, you wouldn't have an espresso before going to bed.
Correct.
But one of the statements is it's actually beneficial for your sleep quality to do that 30 minutes before going to bed. Can you explain a little bit why? And then one of the things I heard was like you have more vivid dreams.
Yeah.
Is that because the energy supply is there, or what's the reason for that?
You've been doing your research.
I'm flying out to LA. I might as well do my homework.
I know. So I think the vivid dreams is just due to your brain being more active. So a lot of people don't realize that, when you sleep, your brain actually works, right? It consolidates the things that you've gone through that day, the memories and all that. So your brain still needs energy. And we have a study right now that is wrapping up from Johns Hopkins University looking at sleep apnea. And it has shown that ketones help with people with sleep apnea and with like oxygen deficiency during sleep. And on the other hand, there's also another study that was just published by KU Leuven in Belgium that showed ketone IQ help with recovery. So increased blood vessels, increased blood oxygenation, increased EPO, and that is all very helpful as a recovery aspect of it. And sleep obviously falls into the recovery aspect as well. So together, you are, introducing a molecule that helps with your muscle recovery as well as your brain sort of activity and energy demand.
Now, from a called user perspective, because you mentioned that you have a product where you mix caffeine together with ketones. For me to get the biggest impact, would I take it together with food? Would I take it by itself? Would I try to minimize food intake for 3 hours beforehand to make sure that my glucose level is low? Like, what's the best way to get the most bang, effect-wise?
This is the best part. It doesn't matter. You can eat and take it, and you can take it while you're fasted. And
so I can take it with my protein shake?
You can take it with your protein shake. In fact, a lot of the studies that showed recovery, they take it together with protein after workout. So they have protein, carbs, and ketones versus only protein and carbs.
What if I have a fatty meal? Because again, I know it's not a keto diet, but if I have a steak, does it make sense to have a keto shot with it?
If you're gonna have a meeting after and you're not on a keto diet, then yeah, which means that even if you have a fatty steak, you won't be making ketones because your body already has higher glucose and high insulin, right?
Yeah.
So if you still want access to ketones, then take a shot.
Okay. Now I get the logical part. So eating fatty food doesn't put me in ketosis.
No, it will take a while before your body,
And because of that, it doesn't matter that I had fatty food because the exogenous ketones will actually give me the energy that I would only get if I would be in ketosis.
Correct.
Okay, understood.
And you've tried keto diet, right? So you need to be on a keto diet for a couple of days before you even get into ketosis because you need to deplete your glycogen first.
I mean, you hallucinate. You want to believe you're in there 2-3 days in, and you do the test and you realize you're not.
Yeah.
And then you're finally in there, and then you realize, oh my God, I got kicked out because I had too much protein. The idea that protein can kick you out of ketosis was so mind-boggling to me because I was like, I'm perfect. I didn't have a single carb, and I'm not in ketosis. And I'm reading up on it like you had too much protein.
Because protein does have a slight insulin response
when it converts, when it accumulates. So again, this is the reason why I say it's the most efficient diet I ever tried. It's the hardest to adhere to. If you have one of the diseases or chronic diseases, then it's an absolute no-brainer because again, the motivation level is so high. But for everyday people who are like, I'm trying to lose some weight, let me do keto diet. I'm like, wow.
Choose a lifestyle and choose a routine that sticks. I think that's more important than what is the routine.
Awesome.
And a lot of people ask me, it's like, oh, is keto diet good? Is carnivore diet good? Is vegan diet good? I'm like, all of this could work for a specific person. If you're doing it for an autoimmune disease specifically, you're doing it for, whatever you're prescribed to because of a specific problem that you're trying to solve, then by all means do it. But don't do it just because you're following the herd.
What are some of the most unexpected stories you heard of users of the product, exogenous ketones, when they came to hey, did you know that taking this, or I got that kind of reaction, or this is what it does for me? Like, what was something that you heard from people that you didn't expect?
I think the most surprise was earlier days when I've got friends with ADHD.
Okay.
And they took it and they're like, I'm able to focus and study for 3 hours. And that was a very pleasant surprise for them.
So it calms
them down. It calms their brain. It quiets the noises. Another one is a University of Pittsburgh Medical Center reached out to us a couple of years ago because they were doing a keto diet trial funded by the Bazuki Group looking at bipolar disease and keto diet. And one of their participants, she couldn't be on a keto diet because she's a marathon runner and she needed to run in a race and she couldn't go on a keto diet. So they're like, well, the other option is ketone IQ and will still keep you in ketosis or have access to ketones, but you have to take an exogenous ketone. So they started giving her exogenous ketones. And this is not from me. This is from the participant directly talking to the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center that she said after just one dose of ketone IQ, and she's a bipolar disorder patient, the voices quiet down. That's what she said.
Incredible.
And that is why we are now writing a grant with UPMC to use ketone IQ to really look at bipolar disorder and see how we can help these patients.
So more cognitive perspective and then integration there. Very interesting. To wrap up from episode, what we normally do is we do like rapid fire questions in regards to, this is more broader, so it's more health optimization wise. When it comes to, hacks and health optimization space, what is some of the things that you think people are a little bit overvaluing, that they're talking about too much impact in the latest days? What myth out there is good for your health, but it's actually not?
I think what I get annoyed watching out there, like all the social media, is when people go really nitty-gritty and in detail about what you can add to your smoothie or like milk or, this everyday things. They're like, oh my God, milk is killing you. I'm like, there are more things out there that are killing you, like cigarettes or alcohol that nobody is regularly talking about. But now you're like picking on like vitamin D or vitamin B that you're taking very small amount of. And that's what makes me a bit annoyed because it clouds the whole information transferring to the general public. Because as a scientist, yes, we need to go into the details because we know the bigger picture already. So now we go into the details and look into the details and explain what a paper, how this study actually shows. But then when you as a domain expert go out there and also just looking so narrowly into these details, you forget a lot of these general population, they don't know the bigger picture. They need to look at the bigger picture. Forget about, what's all these like, small molecules that's harming your liver. You drinking every day is killing your liver already.
So I'm glad you bring up drinking and smoking. So just recently, like a week ago, they came out with a study where they realized the average lifespan would be extended. If we would find a cure for cancer, the average lifespan of humans would be extended by 3 years. So if we cure all cancer out there, we would live 3 years longer. If we would stop drinking and smoking, we would live by 6 years longer. So it just put things in perspective. Yeah. Like we're trying to find a breakthrough for the most, dangerous disease. And while doing that, we're smoking and drinking us to death.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great point. What is one of your health routines that might surprise people?
Walking.
Okay.
I don't even have to think about that. Like walking is such an underrated exercise. And I don't think we should even call it exercise. You should just call it movement, which is a natural state we should be in. We are born to be able to move around and walk around, and hunter-gatherers age, we would be moving around. It's only the modern lifestyle that forced us to sit down for 8 hours a day. So having a walking pad at home while working from home was a game changer for me.
Okay.
And maintaining at least 10 to 15,000 steps a day helped shred my fat like no other things that I've done could.
Your thoughts on peptides?
I think peptide has its place. I think people should go through their doctors or professionals that can monitor them closely if they take peptides so that the side effects are not manifesting. So they want to make sure that their blood, they have their blood tests regularly. They have their hormones tests regularly, and making sure that these peptides are not skewing any of these biomarkers around. But most importantly, don't do peptides because it's a shortcut. Do peptide because you already maxed out everything else. You've already exercise maxed. Yeah. You already, walk max, movement max, you sleep max, everything maxed out. Then do peptide as a tool to push you to the next level. But if you haven't even got yourself into that shape and you're sleeping 4 hours a day, you are stressed all the time and you're overweight, just fix those little things first. That is free, by the way. And then look at peptides.
What's the diet you would recommend for people that have the metabolic inflexibility?
Like I said earlier, there's no one diet that fits all. It really depends on how your metabolism is to begin with, what your goals are. And even if there's one diet that works for you, it may not work 6 months later because your body adapts to it and your body changes. And now you're a different prototype, you're a different archetype. And therefore you need to change your diet accordingly for your next sets of goals. So yeah, work with a trainer, a dietitian, a nutritionist who has experience transforming people's lives via lifestyle changes and nutrition changes so that they can tailor it specific to you. Don't let them give you a PDF saying that, hey, this works for all my clients, you do this. No. You tell them exactly what your problem is. What are you struggling with? Some people may not struggle with their diet. They might struggle with their sleep. Mm-hmm. And because of that, they ended up eating more because they're awake longer. Some people have a more of a mental issue because of the dopamine system, that they are eating for the dopamine rather than eating because they enjoy the food. Everyone is different. So find something that works for you.
And the final question is,
yes,
given the fact we call it Hack You for the audience perspective, what's one hack besides walking they can implement in their daily routine starting today that will change their life the most?
Mentally tell yourself that you love yourself. Self-worth. I think that what started for me was that when I started meditation about 3-4 years ago, I haven't done it for a while now, I should be doing it more. It opened that door for me of self-worth. And I talked about this in my previous podcast as well, that growing up in Asia, a lot of times our parents, our teachers, they never said they love us because of who we are. They love us because we got good grades. They love us because we got into good schools. They love us because we got a good job. They love us because we got paid certain salaries. They never said, I love you just for you being you. And I think growing up, being an adult, whenever there is a failure, whenever, I start blaming myself. And I had to sit down and come to terms with, you are enough as you are, and you can start from scratch whenever, wherever. And that opened up everything else. If you love yourself, then you start managing your stress. Then everything else matter less. Your work matter less. I'm not saying not to take your work seriously, but it matters less than your health. It matters less than your worth. Then you start moving more because you love yourself enough to want to make a change. Then you start to show up more for your family, for your friends, because you are worth it. You're not showing up for them because you are giving money, because you are buying this or buying that. You are showing up for you, and they are there because of you.
Beautiful answer. Again, this is the first time somebody responded that. I love that question because we had different approaches, from distracting, not trusting social media, or getting off, self-love and self-respect. And I think something that the moment we always say, if you love other people, take care of yourself first, so you can actually help other people. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you got to show up for yourself first before you show up for other people. Otherwise, you can't.
Now, for the audience, where can they find more about you so they can then start, showing up for themselves in the future?
Yeah, they can find me on all social media at Latt Mansor, LattMansor. And if you want to know more about ketone, ketone.com, ketone.com.
Awesome. Latt, thanks so much for being Hack You.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it, man. It was definitely worth coming all till late.
Same here.
Thank you. Appreciate you.